So what do you think? Do people like change? Do they like innovation? That's a funny one. We like innovation, we don't like change. I can tell you one thing, we're good at it. The trick is to compare us to the other animals. Humans are the change species. So I want to give you a couple of examples of this. Other animals that don't have wings, they just walk around. We're not really supposed to fly, but you'll notice we're just not happy with what nature's given us. We say, no, we can do better. Or you think about healthcare. This is an odd one. I was talking to my dad recently, and he informed me that when he was a little boy, he was not allowed to go swimming in the local swimming hole because his mom thought that's where polio lived. Sounds a little funny now, doesn't it? Polio was a disease that attacked our children. I don't know if you know a lot about it. It's fairly eradicated now in many countries. But what it would do, it would take out their leg muscles. So if you have kids and you want a dark image, picture your galloping child not being able to walk anymore, but then it also took out their lung muscles. What an uplifting thought, right? But you would have to watch your child struggle for their last breath. And this went on for many decades. Millions of kids every year got stricken by this, and they just couldn't figure out what happened, but they did know that it attacked kids in the spring, and that's when the swimming pools opened. So then a team of scientists got together and they said, we can do better. As we look into this future together, it doesn't have to be that way. And now we got a room full of people. I bet not many of us are worried about polio. That's one generation. That's what the human animal does. That's not what other animals do. So what I can say is, while we may or may not like change, we are the change animal. And one of the big changes that I want to pay special attention to today is this idea about how we produce stuff. In 1850, you could buy shoes. Where would you get them? Think about that for a moment. In 1850, you'd probably get your shoes from a little cobbler. And you could say, well, how many people would work there? Might be 2. Might be 5, but that would be a big one. And they'd probably be related if there were that many. And then around 1900, we got a different idea. Rather than selling 1 pair of shoes today, we want to sell 1 million. Rather than sell them to this little local village, we want to sell it to the whole country, or maybe the whole world. Rather than have 2 people work there, we want to have 20,000. But then we had to change the way that we produced things. So, for example, it used to be that somebody would walk in and say, I need shoes. And then all the people would look over and say, oh, he needs shoes. And somebody would touch that person's foot. And they would make a shoe for that person. Maybe shoemaking is not that purposeful. Maybe it's not like curing polio. But everybody would see the shoe emerge for a certain person. Well, under this new invention, and it is a fairly new invention, it's like a beta test. We're taking a look at how it works to scale that up. And the way that we now scale that up is we go with hyperspecialization, where we take the flow of any process, making a shoe or making a consultancy service, and we snap it up into little bits. And the people in those jobs are expected to be hyper-specialized, where they do similar things in a routine way. It's repetitive because that's how you get really good. You put in the hours. No, you're not going to meet the customer. Most of us are not going to see the customer. Maybe there's one person that works in a shoe company now that spends 8 or 10 hours a day uploading pictures of shoes. They don't take the pictures, they don't wear the shoes, and they don't meet the customer. Now, there's some good and there's some bad. This whole notion of putting people in these tiny little boxes, one of the things you might say it's good is it increases reliability and lets us reduce costs. Because we can measure very carefully what we expect out of you in advance. And if you don't do what we say, there's going to be a punishment. We'll take your job, we'll take your bonus, we'll take your raise, we'll publicly ostracize you. And if we need to, we'll yell. But there is some real good. If you want to cure polio across the world, 3 people working in a drugstore in a small village probably won't do it. You need an R&D lab. If you want to ship the drug all around the world, you probably need logistics and transportation. So clearly there are positives. There also are some negatives. And as we're beta testing this and we're looking at this idea, one of the clear negatives is that most people on the planet are not engaged in what they do. Most people see where they spend most of their waking hours as something that's not worth their time other than to get the money to spend on a roof over your head. We know that up to 70% of people do not feel that they can be their best at work, and they have to shut off the best part of themselves to get through. Not too long ago, I stumbled on a little piece of neuroscience writing that really thrilled me. I'd never heard of this idea. And this idea is called a seeking system. It's a part of our brain that also could be called the ventral striatum that causes us to explore our environments for what we don't already know. It urges us to look for cause and effect in an innate way. Innate means we don't have to learn it. All of us already have it at birth. A little 2-month-old will have this. They might have all kinds of cool toys, but when they've not held your car keys yet, those car keys become very appetizing. They want to put them in their mouth. They want to learn about them. When I say innate, I don't mean just human animals, I mean all mammals. If you take a cage with mice in it, and you put it in this little food dispenser, and you have to hit a little trigger, and out comes the food, what you'll find is the mice go toward that new thing, and they start playing with and exploring it. They don't shy away. They're attracted. This is the seeking system at work. It's looking for the cause and effect of our actions. When I do this to this trigger, what happens? How can I gather resources from that? Now, when we follow those urges of the seeking system, our body rewards us with something called dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel alive. Friends tell me that it is the legal cousin to cocaine. It makes you exuberant. It makes you enthusiastic. It makes you want to do more of that thing. It doesn't make you complacent and tuned out. It tunes you in and makes you want to give more. I have to share something with you now that I think will trouble you, but sometimes you have to leave a mark. Some of you know the name Martin Seligman. Martin Seligman is currently seen as the father of positive psychology, but that's not where he started his career. He started his career shocking dogs. And what he would do is he'd take these poor creatures, this is before PETA, which is an animal protection group, came into being, and he would put these poor dogs into what are called Pavlovian hammocks. And what this meant is he could hold them there and shock them. Half of them he gave away to get out. They could press a little panel with their nose, and when they did that, the shocking would stop. The other half, there's nothing they could do. They would just have to take, and they knew it hurt because they would yelp and urinate. But what I now want to tell you is when they took all these dogs and they put them in this strange little cage, something remarkable happened. And this is the part you're not going to like, I think. The dogs that earlier had a way out of their situation would easily hop from the side that says no from shocking across the little barrier to the side that says no shocking. Not one dog failed to do that. It wasn't that hard. But the dogs that earlier had just been shocked with no recourse, when they got into this little box and got shocked, they just laid down and took it, yelping and whimpering until the shocks concluded. They didn't even try, because what these dogs had learned earlier was helplessness. What they learned is there's nothing we can do, so we may as well just take it. Let's just disengage and get through it. And what I'm afraid is that this is what we're doing to our employees. This widespread, rampant disengagement that we see at work is because we have inside of us an innate need or drive to explore our environment, to learn new things, and to understand our cause and our effect. We're being urged to do that from within, but many of us find ourselves in jobs where that just isn't possible. We might want to explore and learn, but that takes time, and then we miss our bonus, and then we miss our quota, and then we miss our KPIs. We might want to meet the end customer who uses the work, but when are we going to have time to do that? It's not part of our job description. This widespread disengagement and this feeling that I don't understand why I do what I do, it's not only bad for companies in terms of their innovation and their idea that you want people's full engagement at work, and it's not only just bad because it's boring and it makes the time on the planet seem less useful. It's also really bad at the cellular level, and I wanted to share that with you. My hero, Stephen Cole, he is a professor at UCLA of medicine, and he's now teamed up with Barbara Fredrickson, who is a professor of psychology at the University of North Carolina. And together they do something pretty interesting where they ask people questions about how important their actions seem to them and whether or not their life seems to have meaning. And then they take a bit of people's blood and they look at the immune cells and they look to see how our immunity is functioning. And what they've learned in 4 separate replications in 2 different countries is that people who don't feel that their actions are important, even at work, shut off their immune systems and leave the body very open to illness. There's another set of studies done where they look at mortality as the dependent variable, how long you actually live. In one of these studies, for example, they measure your feeling of meaning and purpose at time 1, and then they look to see who's alive 14 years later. And of 7,000 people that they measured, 14 years later, about 700 were dead. And perhaps the best single predictor of whether or not you were still alive or dead is the feeling of meaning and purpose that you predicted 14 years ago about yourself. Let me tell you something. Henry Ford made the Model T in one color for 13 years. Who knows what color? Black. It was cheaper, dried quicker. Today, I don't think we have 13 years. I don't know that we have 13 months before consumers' tastes change. If you're in IT, you don't have 13 weeks. What we need is to have armies of volunteers where employers are bringing the best that they have and experimenting with the boundaries, trying new things. My greatest hope is for a golden age in human emotions, where as we go into this future together, our seeking systems are lit up. Thank you very much.